beginning.
I'm in awe.
We're fearless. I'm not sure. All right, our live stream is.
Joe?
Yes.
It looks like on the YouTube channel, comments are turned off.
Well, how did that happen? Let me click learn more and figure out if I can figure out. Interesting. Okay, well, we will have to figure that out for the upcoming webinar. I don't know if we're going to figure it out for the 9 o'clock webinar. It looks like what happened is that something changed about our channel settings for it to be a school channel rather than a entertainment channel. And that seems to have disabled the commenting features at the moment. So we'll do some playing with that later today. So let me stop sharing my screen here for a moment and kind of hop back in. So good morning. Welcome, PACT families. We appreciate you joining us this morning. If you hopped on a little bit early, you might have seen you're our first group that we are doing this workshop with. So we're learning a lot about how the technology is working. And we appreciate your patience, and we appreciate you being here to learn with us. If we have any technical glitches that happen throughout today, we will be posting this video online as well. And certainly we can be reached via email and that sort of thing. So I'd like to first start with introduction. So if we have not met in person before, my name is Joe Wood. I am Natomas Charter School's Executive Director, which means that I work with all 5 academies at Natomas Charter School. And I also have a son who used to attend Star Academy and is now a 6th grader at PFAA. So I'm going to have Mrs. Carter introduce herself next.
Hi, families. I'm Alicia Carter, and I'm the Academy Coordinator at PACT. And if I haven't met you, welcome. And if I have, I miss you.
And let's have Dr. Ellis go next.
Good morning. I'm Addie Ellis. I am Student Services Director, and I too work with all 5 academies. I had the opportunity to be at PACT a lot more this year prior to school shutdown closure. I look forward to seeing you all face to face or screen to screen soon.
And then Mrs. Burial.
Hello, I'm Laura Burial. I'm the Teaching and Learning Director at Natomas Charter School, which means that I get to work with all 5 academies as well. In addition, I was the PACT coordinator for 3 years, about 7 years ago. I also am a parent. My child went to Star Academy and then currently attends PFAA.
So welcome once again. Let's go ahead and get started. In just a moment, I'm going to share my slides and we're going to kind of go through our presentation. So The organization for today is I'm going to talk a little bit about all of the school-wide activities that we have going on in terms of planning for next school year. And Mrs. Carter is going to talk specifically about PACT, and then we'll have a time period where we're going to do a little bit of a question and answer. So let me go ahead and share my screen again and make sure I have the right tab. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and go into presenter mode. And Mrs. Carter, Mrs. Burial, Dr. Ellis, I just want to make sure you guys see the slides. Awesome, everyone should see the slides. So hopefully you're here to learn a little bit about what we're planning for the upcoming school year. That's the purpose of today's meeting. So, I think memes are kind of a nice way to start right now. So, coronavirus was certainly something none of us planned for this school year. I am a big fan of Harry Potter, so thinking about Dolores Umbridge feels a lot like coronavirus right now, where all of the fun parts of school seem to be getting canceled. And it's making it tough to really have that community that we want to have, but we're looking to do it in a virtual space. Also, as a kid of the 80s, Marty McFly, Traveling to the Future, 2020 is probably a year you should probably skip past. It's been a little rough. Hopefully it'll get better in the next 6 months. So as I mentioned, the agenda for today's conversation. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're planning as a school. Mrs. Carter is going to talk about how we're planning at the academy level, and then we'll have some time for question and answers. So our original plan was that you could post your questions in the little comment field to the right. I'm going to have to play with that for our future parent meetings. That doesn't seem to be working for this one. But we also have the question and answer Google form. So all of you who registered for this event received an email with the PACT Academy question and answer form. So throughout this presentation, you can go ahead and post questions there. We also gave people the opportunity to post questions last night. So we have a couple of questions that we'll begin with when we get to questions and answers. So first, I think this time of distance learning has been a time where our school as a whole has showed some real leadership and innovation, both on the teacher level, the student level, and the parent level. And these are just some of the examples of our teachers and families transitioning to this new hybrid environment. And so as a school's executive director, I just want to say thank you. I know it's been a journey. I was thinking last night that we closed school 2 months ago yesterday. And when we started on this journey, we thought it was going to be an extended weekend. Then it became 3 weeks. Then it became the entire school year. And so we appreciate all that you've been doing, to be flexible and come on this journey with us. And we've seen this in our feedback from students, families, and staff. So over the last couple of weeks, you've seen some surveys go out, and we are using that information to not just reflect on how this year's been going with distance learning, but also plan for next year. And so, overall, we're finding that families are positive and appreciative. They appreciated our immediately going online with distance learning and refining it. For the most part, people are saying that the work that's being provided especially in our site-based programs is just enough. And one thing that is kind of interesting, though, is 60% of our families in our site-based programs are actually interested in potentially sticking with distance learning for the future, for the coming school year. We also have had some families in our site-based programs that have expressed interest in maybe transitioning to PACT and VLA as they've learned how well this is actually working in their own households. We've also learned that we have some opportunities for growth. A lot of our families are asking for more live teaching or recorded lessons. In the case of PACT, maybe some more live workshops. For our site-based programs, some clarity around grading, looking at additional arts instruction and virtual performances, and thinking about how can we differentiate and individualize even more than we already do. So talking a little bit about what the coming school year is going to look like. So here's our framework for our thinking right now. First of all, please know that guidelines are still very much under development. If you watch the news, you have the exact same information that we do from the state and federal officials around what school opening might look like next year. And we know that guidelines are being developed by Sacramento County Public Health, California Department of Public Health, the governor's office, and the California Department of Education. So as those guidelines are being rolled out, it will shape our formal plans that we do later in the summer. Whatever decisions we do make, they're ultimately going to be guided by public health experts. We are a school. We have 1,900 students who come and visit us every single day. And so the health and safety of all of those students is extremely important to our school community. And so we'll be following the recommendations from Sacramento County Public Health and California Department of Health and the CDC. Our third area is that it's really going to take everyone together to keep people safe and healthy. This is a time period where we really have to focus on the collective health and safety of everyone. Everything from taking personal precautions around wearing masks and washing your hands to not coming to school if you have a fever, even if you think it's not related to coronavirus. And so we're going to really have to take care of each other. And then the fourth domain is really planning with the full Natomas Charter School community. So we shared these slides initially with our staff on May 1st. Staff have already started planning, but now we're rolling it out to different community groups to get a little bit more information and perspective from you guys about how we can make sure this is a model that's going to work for everyone. So our context for planning right now, as I mentioned, is the information that the governor's office is releasing. We know that he started with the 6 critical indicators, of which number 5 is about physical distancing in business, schools, and childcare facilities. We also know that there's the 4-stage reopening plan the state is working through. Schools are considered lower risk workplaces and are part of stage 2. Right now, as a state, we're in the midst of stage 2. And if you were to go on the it's covid.ca.gov website, and you look at stage 2, you'll notice there's guidelines for each industry. Currently, there's no guidelines for schools, but we expect some to be released. However, based on some statements from the governor over the last few weeks, we're thinking students are probably going to be attending in shifts at some point in the year. We're probably looking at lunch in classrooms in our site-based programs and requiring physical distancing, and starting school in July or August. Now, we already kind of met this one because our first day of school is currently planned for August 12th, and we're planning on staying with that date. And then also looking for summer learning opportunities. We're also looking at models outside of California. So looking at whatever existing guidelines there are from the CDC or the California Department of Public Health. Please realize these guidelines are from before the school closures. So we don't know if they're going to be refined in any way. We know that there are different task forces that are working on developing guidelines, and we're a charter school, and we coordinate with the California Charter Schools Association and some of the other schools in our region to kind of share best practices. We're also coordinating and sharing best practices with the schools in the Natomas community. So I speak regularly with the Natomas Unified Superintendent, along with the executive directors at Westlake and NP3, so that we can have some commonality for all of our families. And we're also looking at international models. And just this week, Shanghai Disneyland reopened. And you might think Disneyland schools, they don't really go together. They actually go together in many ways, because similar to Disneyland, we have to accommodate a lot of different people that are coming from different places. So looking at how they're doing their reopening along with schools in Europe or even higher education to get a sense of what might be the best plan moving forward. So here's what we know right now. We know that as community members, we're going to be living with the virus for the next 12 to 18 months. That's the earliest timeline anyone's realistically talking about for a vaccine or a treatment. That means that in this time period, we're really focused on community virus mitigation. We're not even in a prevention place anymore. The virus is here. We're working on how we reduce it and reduce exposure. That's going to really take into account personal protection strategies like masks and washing hands and respiratory hygiene. But we also recognize that schools are integral to our economy. To take an approach that we're just going to go to distance learning for the remainder of the school year, for next school year, probably would not work and would make the economy really challenging to reopen. Families do rely on us as sources of childcare. But families also rely on us for other resources, mental health supports, food, and just providing normalcy and stability for their children. So in some degree, learning has to continue. Things we don't know, and as you're probably hearing from my comments, we don't have any guidance details yet, so those will be forthcoming. Looking at any historical pandemics, we probably are going to see future outbreaks in our community and throughout the state and nation, and we don't know the exact timeline. If we look at the 1918 flu pandemic, it looks like maybe in the fall we would see a resurgence, and that seems to be what epidemiologists are talking about right now. We also don't know what our access to testing and contact tracing is going to look like. And that's pretty concerning, because when we look at some of the international models, they very much are relying on regular testing and contact tracing. And that's going to be a piece that our state and federal leaders are going to need to help us figure it out. And then the other piece that we're keeping an eye on is the impacts on communities that are reopening. In the greater Sacramento region, we're pretty closed still, but Yuba City and Marysville, they've already been reopening. If you go up to the Lake Tahoe region, they've been reopening. So trying to get a sense from these places that are already reopening, how much does the virus come back and how quickly, and how do we mitigate that? And so ultimately what we don't know is what will potentially change between now and August 12th. So we encourage you to stay flexible. So considering all of this ambiguity, you might be wondering, well, why are you guys even thinking about planning? And it really comes down to this Winston Churchill quote for us. He who fails to plan is planning to fail. We recognize that there are schools throughout the country and the state that are waiting till they get more guidance. But in Natomas Charter School, we really felt like that did a disservice to our students, our families, and to our employees. And we wanted to start this journey before the summer began. So we see ourselves as a community leader. We can provide stability, consistency, and responsibility for our community if we start planning now. Because if we start planning now, we can control our reaction and plan for the future. So all of this in mind, here's what we see as the potential realities for next school year. We will probably have school days where everyone is on campus. That might not be at the beginning of the year. It might be later in the year when we know more about the coronavirus in our community. We're probably going to have school days where physical distancing is required on campus. We'll probably have school days again where we have community-wide stay-at-home orders. And we're probably going to have school days where one or more students are required to quarantine because maybe someone in their family is sick. We also know that we're going to have school days where families request long-term independent study. And that for some families might be about switching to PACT or switching to VLA, but for others, it might be about wanting to stay at Star Academy, Leading Edge, and PFAA, and just being able to do distance learning for the school year. So with that, we have a four-stage plan that we're developing. And as you can see, it's kind of talks, it goes from everyone on campus to independent study. And so as we go through these stages, really what I want you to notice most here is that the criteria is really based on what Sacramento County Public Health is telling us needs to be done. So if, at a period of time, County Public Health is saying, physical distancing is encouraged, but it's not required, then we probably would have school days with everyone on campus where we're looking at reducing access to confined spaces, such as locker rooms, cafeterias, that sort of thing. If we are being told physical distancing is required, we're probably looking at some sort of hybrid learning where students are attending in shifts and we're limiting access to the campus by non-students as much as possible, but still wanting our programs to occur in a normal way. Realistically, for our site-based programs, when we are required to do shifts, we cannot have all students on campus. So we're talking about every other day or every other week or morning and afternoon, that type of idea. Stage 3 is distance learning. This would be if Sacramento County Public Health says, hey, there's actually an outbreak at your school, so we need you to quarantine for the next 14 days and close all of your campuses. Or Sacramento County Public Health might say, actually, there's an outbreak in Sacramento as a whole, and so we're going to go ahead and ask all schools in the region to close for the next period of time. So we'd be switching back to distance learning like we're currently doing. And then stage 4 is individual families choosing to be on long-term independent study. So our goal is not to think of these as 4 separate things, but really one plan for all of the stages. And so as a school, we've been trying to think through, how do we plan for all of these? Because we're going to probably experience all 4 at some point in the year. And we don't want school to have to pause as we ramp up to transition from one to another. So our 4 areas for design are really thinking about our instructional plan, how we're going to address learning gaps, how we're going to make sure families and students feel connected to our school campus, and ensuring the health and safety of our school. So in terms of thinking about instruction, what we're really focusing on right now in our plan development is how can our instructional models be flexible? And by flexible, really we're talking about location flexible. So if you're a student at Project X, making sure that all of the course materials are posted in Schoology in such a way that a student would know how to access them regardless of if that student is attending the workshop in person or attending the workshop virtually. And so it gets to the second part, leveraging technology. We really envision that we're going to need to provide a device for every student. So we're looking at providing iPads for our TK through first grade students and Chromebooks for our 2nd through 12th grade students so they can access learning anytime and anywhere they have internet access. But also through this, taking an equity and support-based lens, recognizing that every family is unique, every student's unique, and we're going to have to adapt to meet everyone's needs. Our second area is addressing learning gaps. If you look at any of the research, there's already things called the summer slide. So when students go into summer break, that there are some learning loss that happens. But this year with COVID-19, we probably have a more significant loss, especially in our site-based programs. And so looking at protocols for how we're going to assess any gaps and what summer learning we might provide and what school year interventions we might do. I mentioned connectedness. So this is how are we going to reconnect our students with our campuses when they can come back? Are we going to do some celebratory events? We have events like Web and Link Crew on the Black Rock campus and thinking about how we might make those virtual. We fundamentally believe that families are partners in our educational process and we want families to be part of our school community, but we're trying to think through what does that look like from a health and safety standpoint when we're trying to limit the number of people that are on campus. And then the third domain, mental health supports. A number of families have reached out saying that actually things are generally okay and good, but we do have a handful of families that have also reached out saying, hey, my child's really struggling or I'm really struggling. And we want to be able to provide some mental health supports where needed for our students, families, and staff members. And then the fourth area, I think, is the area that we all think a lot about right now, which is just general health and safety. So, what are we going to do for our respiratory hygiene protocols? We had some in place before the school closure around hand washing and covering your mouth when you cough, but revisiting those. What are our processes for sick students and staff? So if a sick student or staff member is on campus, how are we going to get them off campus in a timely manner? And what do we need to do in terms of public health reporting? And then regular sanitation. So before the closure, our custodians were actually sanitizing all spaces every night, all high touch spaces. And so kind of revisiting those protocols and making sure that we're set up and ready to go. So our timeline for our plan is, right now we're sort of in the month of May where we're doing some initial planning and community sharing. In June and July, we'll be working on our summer implementation and then getting ready for the school year in August. The graphic at the bottom is actually probably the most important. As I shared at the beginning, we don't have any definitive guidelines yet. We do suspect, though, that the guidelines that we will receive will largely be around masks and sanitizer and like where to put blue tape on the floor in terms of having kids walk around classrooms and stuff. And so with that in mind, we've really started working on the instructional plan first. And then as we get more details around health and safety, we'll certainly be letting families know. I know with other parent groups that we've talked to, people have said, well, what's the exact timeline? When are you going to know? I wish I could definitively say, June 1st or June 15th or June 30th. We just don't know. And so as a result, we're encouraging everyone to stay connected. And as soon as we have information, we will be sharing it with you. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Mrs. Carter, who's going to talk to us a little bit about PACT Academy and what the general plans are for PACT.
Thanks, Joe. All right, so luckily with PACT Academy, we're in a unique position to be able to be flexible with our learning no matter what the situation is, and we're already really good at that. So congratulations, PACT families, you're in a good spot. And we feel confident that we're going to be able to address this in a way that maintains community and learning for our students, but keeps everybody safe. All right. Thanks. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of information from surveys, and then we're just going to talk through what PACT might look like in each of those 4 stages, and then a couple of things of each of those 4 elements that we're going to address. So first of all, from our parent and student surveys, we gathered some information that for the most part, our families are feeling very supported and informed, that the big point of contact for our PACT families is advisor meetings, and that those are going well and have continued pretty seamlessly. So that's really, really positive for keeping that advising family relationship going. And that's the crux of where the learning is happening right now. We're hearing that many families would like to see virtual options continue regardless of what the state and county are ordering as far as closures and openings. Parents miss community and seek connection with each other and with other families, and that we may need more support next year with curriculum options when you're not coming in as frequently, that the paper pencil curriculum options maybe are more challenging. We might need to look at more digital type options. Students very clearly are communicating that they miss their friends. And those of you who know me know I have several of our students in my household communicating the same thing. So creating those connections is important. Students are appreciating opportunities to check in with classmates. Some are struggling with developing a schedule at home that works for them, or sticking to a schedule, or finding the motivation to get the work done. And many of them just need reassurance and consistency in order to be able to move forward. All right, so with all of those items in mind, we started, our staff has been meeting, and we're trying, as Joe said, to develop a plan for instruction that would really fit all 4 stages, and to look at what that might look like in any of those stages. All right, Joe, next slide. Thanks. All right, so I took the slides that we saw previously and just kind of dropped a little bit of additional information in here for our PACT families. So stage 1 would be that stage where all the students would be on campus. And what that might look like at PACT is a relatively normal situation. We would be holding workshops in person. We would be holding advising meetings in person, special education services in person, things pretty normal. Field trips might be able to be scheduled following whatever the local social distance guidelines are, family events likewise. So a relatively normal-ish looking situation. I did put some notes in here that there are going to be virtual options available, even in a very open campus situation. So one of the things that we're hearing from families is that even if the campuses are open, we'd really like to have the option to be able to join virtually so that we can make a decision about when we're sending our kids to campus. And so the PACT staff are working really hard right now to make sure that that can be an option. All right, next slide. In stage 2 would be hybrid learning. So this would be where physical distancing is required. Our lovely new facility, which is all ready and almost ready for occupancy, has some nice big classrooms with good space. I've been over there kind of looking at that. And because of our unique situation at PACT, where we already have very small workshop sizes and class sizes, we are in a really good place to be able to allow students on campus with physical distancing. So we may have workshops with slightly smaller caps of students so that we can make sure that we can maintain social distancing. There may be fewer opportunities to be hanging out on campus in between workshops so that we have fewer people on campus in the space. But other than that, this looks relatively normal. So we're still holding workshops where you have the option to come in person or to join virtually. Maybe students and staff are wearing more protective equipment at this stage. We have advising meetings, which, because it's one family and an advisor, we can still do the social distancing and the physical distancing during those advising meetings, and services can still be held on campus. Here in this stage, what kind of shifts is the idea of field trips and family events. That's where we have a lot less control over other people and large groups. And so that's where we look on canceling or rescheduling those kinds of events, or taking them online and virtual. All right, so stage 3. Thanks. So stage 3, we're on stay-at-home orders, either for quarantine or for a county. And so there's some definite closure for shorter periods of time. In this situation, all students would attend instruction virtually. So this would be Project X, this would be workshops where we're not bringing students onto campus. And so again, our advisors are developing their workshops right now with this in mind so that they can very easily take the workshop online. When we closed this school year, we were in the middle of a situation where we had not planned for that. And so a lot of our workshops had to just be canceled. We couldn't shift them online that quickly, but we're working now and over the summer to make sure that whatever we put on the schedule, at least for semester 1 at this point, can very quickly be switched to an online format and back, or to have a mixed group so that families have a lot of choice in that. So the good news is there should be workshops just done through the computer. We will also at that point maybe kick in some additional online connection opportunities. So where normally you would be able to be on campus and checking in with your friends or other families, when we move to an at-home situation, we would want to create some virtual space for those things. In this stage, advising meetings would shift to virtual, and would probably shift to slightly more frequently so that every 2 weeks, every family is being seen. We can make sure you're getting what you need. And then special education services shift to the virtual model, whatever that may look like. Again, in this situation, field trips would be rescheduled or canceled, and family events also. But what we are looking at continuing some of our virtual field trip opportunities that we've been experimenting with this last quarter. All right, and then last slide here, stage 4. So stage 4 would be long-term independent study. Really the big difference for PACT families here is just the length of time of the campus closure. It looks very much like stage 3. We're doing everything virtually. We're providing those connections virtually. The staff are more likely in this kind of situation to be also working from home. And so we shift to that full virtual model and postpone what we can't shift to online. Continue to hold those virtual workshops and advising meetings, and continue to provide connection opportunities. All right, so those are our 4 stages. And again, shifting between those is really going to be at what the state and the county and the local governance boards are saying we need to do. And so we're just going to be prepared to shift gears whenever that happens and just keep things going as much as possible. All right, so let's look at the 4 areas where we're looking at planning. So planning for flexible learning, again, because you're already part of an independent study charter school, we are super flexible by definition. So some areas where we as a staff are really looking at making plans differently is that, again, we're planning workshops that don't require as much direct contact between students or materials. So for example, something like Lego robotics, where all those little pieces get touched by all those little people all the time, we're gonna put that one on hold and save it for a later date. And we're gonna look at more the individual online coding classes for those technology pieces where students are working independently on their own computers, and we don't have to do as much object sharing. Let's see, what else? Designing workshops that can go online at a moment's notice. So things that easily shift from in-person to online, or a blend of those two things. And then we're also really looking at digital curriculum options, some that we already have offered, and also looking into some new options so that families can quickly shift to the online support with their advisor. For technology, we're getting some training for all of our staff in Schoology so that we can start setting up some virtual classroom spaces for workshops and for advising, so that we can share documents and links very easily, and so that you can access those from anywhere. We are considering many opportunities for connection. So we're looking at things like counseling groups. We're looking at grade level, like hangout social times, where you're not just logging on virtually to participate in an academic workshop, but also in some communication and some community building and sharing. And then for equity and support, we're working on how does it look to assess students remotely when we're not bringing them on campus necessarily to complete their assessments. What models do we have that we can use to get good data to know where students are and how we can help support you at home? We're working on researching various methods for students to share their work from home with their advisors. One of those magical things about PACT is when your kid gets to bring in their work and share that with their advisor. So we're looking at some ways to help streamline that and make it easier for all of the parties involved. Sometimes holding that paper up to the camera is a little difficult. And then also we're really working on prioritizing what we call universal supports, which is the things we put in place for all families to just help support them in their academic journeys and their learning journeys, and our SPED services, and creating advisor-led maybe intervention groups to help with some missed learning or some things that need to be revisited. All right, number 2. So addressing learning gaps. Again, this is one of those things that's a little different when you're already in homeschooling and independent study. We're not always moving a class of students along at a curriculum pace that's the same as a site-based program. So we're going to do what we always do, which is when you come back to school in the fall, we're going to do some assessment. We're going to see where you are, and we're going to move you forward. So we're just going to kind of formalize that a little bit more, make sure that families and advisors have ways to assess remotely if need be. And then we're really looking at making sure that families have some grade level checklists to give them an idea of what skills might have been skipped. So very often your advisors in your meeting are doing that very naturally, but when you're not sitting next to them, it's a little bit harder to keep track of that. And so very formally providing, hey, here are the skills that you got to last year. Which ones on this list are maybe things that you need to loop back around to? And then what are we looking for this year? For summer learning, again, this is something that we always kind of do in homeschool land, which is we just learn all the time. So this is, as always, our iReady instructional accounts and BrainPop account run through the summer. So those are accessible to students from home. And if you want your kids to keep working on them, that's a great plan. It can kind of keep them going and avoid some of that summer slide that Mr. Wood referred to. NCS is working on the teaching and learning department, and some of the other campuses have been working on putting together some summer quest challenges. And so they have graciously offered to share those with our students. So there will be some nice academic and fun game-based quests coming. And then we continue all summer to post learning opportunities on Court, ways to do things from the park or in your backyard or in your kitchen or playing board games that can build learning and reinforce skills just naturally while still kind of getting that rest and downtime for your family in the summer. And then as far as school year intervention goes, again, for PACT, this is going to look very, very similar to what we do usually, which is we assess your child individually, see where they are, look at the skills that need to be addressed and loop back around to those, and to help you as the parent educator determine how best to address those things. And we are working on some staff training for additional curricular resources. All right, Thanks. Next, prioritizing connectedness. So this is one of the big ones for us. We definitely have heard loud and clear from all parties involved, staff, students, parents, that connectedness is what's been the most difficult by shifting from our building to online. So we just want to make sure that we're doing things to reconnect students. We're looking at doing some monthly themes where if we are spending a lot of time in the virtual world, that we could post some challenges and have people share what they're doing at home, kind of some fun family activities. That we have some social opportunities weekly by grade level where kids can come together and talk to peers of their age. That and that the workshops are going to be able to move back and forth so that there's continuity and less disruption. As far as families and parents, we're looking at scheduling coffee with the coordinator online. So times for parents to come and talk to me or to other adults in our community to share ideas to support each other. And again, those online family challenges on social media are something that we're building into that. And then for mental health supports, we have a great counseling department. We have a great student services department and mental health resources. So we have a lot of things that we can get to families, but we are looking at doing some more counselor-led groups. So Miss Danielle is working on putting together some grade level session times where they could drop in as needed, kind of like a workshop, but a little bit less committed where you can just come in when you need to. And then developing collections of links and gathering them together and making sure that our advisors know where all of those things are so that when you do have a specific need, we can get you connected with the right resources. And then finally, health and safety. So we have a nice hand washing photo here, super fun. Working just a lot on hygiene. The good news is that building is super clean right now. It's there are not a lot of germs living in our new facility, so we're going to start with a clean slate. But working on protection, personal protection equipment. I've ordered my cute masks so that by the time school starts, I'll have fun ones to wear. And keeping lots of cleaning supplies, making sure surfaces are clean. We want options for families and students to engage remotely throughout the year also. So at PACT, honestly, besides the fact that you need to turn in your paperwork and meet with your advisor and be doing that learning at home, you don't have to come into campus very often if you don't want to. So we're trying to provide families with a lot of choice. If you need to stay home for a couple of weeks, then please do so. And we're going to give you lots of virtual options. If you need to come in and we're open, then please do so. So we're going to just make it as flexible as possible. Procedures and the processes for students and staff. Again, the details of this will be getting worked out over the summer as things change. But the idea that there are virtual solutions for all situations. So if you've got the sniffles, stay home and recuperate before you come back in when your immune system is reboosted. We're also really looking at what are the primary essential workshops and classes that should not be canceled, and train some backup teaching staff so that if a staff member became sick, someone could step in and keep those things going. And our special education services fall into that. Our Project X classes that are regularly meeting all year and are advising are those critical components. And then enrichment workshops, we keep going as much as we can and we adapt as needed. And then sanitation, the staff are just getting lots of training on sanitizing and cleaning. We're making sure we're ordering supplies and we have things available. And we're looking at, as we're moving the furniture into the new building, what do we not need? What's just extra stuff sitting around to gather germs? So we can store that for a while and just have surfaces that are essential. And so there's not as many things to worry about. All right. And I think this is back to you.
It is. I had to take a moment to unmute myself. So hopefully you can all see me again and hear me again. So, just to kind of close out, I hope what you saw here as a theme is really, preparing for change. So, our kind of call to action for our families moving forward really comes down to three things. First of all, stay connected. Continue over the summer to check your email and social media. We'll probably have another parent meeting before the end of the school year, but stay connected. And if you have any questions that come up, please reach out to either me or Mrs. Carter. Plan for personal flexibility. I think, if there's any key message that you should take from this webinar is that next year will be just as dynamic as this year has been. And if maybe even a little bit more so. And so we should really be thinking about how we can plan for personal flexibility every family and every child is unique. Some children require a little bit more pep talk for change than others. And if that happens to be one of your children, kind of helping them with that. And then the last one is really important. We will only be able to keep schools open if everyone is responsible for their own health and safety as much as possible. And so taking time to discuss with your children, what's going on with coronavirus and what are some strategies that we can all do to stay safe and healthy. I know, one thing that we're working on with our son is he's not a big fan of wearing masks. And so trying to work on why that's important. We happen to live in Yolo County where it is required everywhere you go. So it makes it a little bit more pragmatic. We have to sort of figure out the solution, but it's important to have those conversations with our children so that they are prepared for the upcoming school year, because it is going to look a little different. And, everyone needs time to sort of adjust to change. So with that, our final quote is this one, which, this has always been an inspirational quote for us as a school. It's a Sir Ken Robinson. We may not be able to predict the future, but we can help shape it. I think at no time in my career has this been maybe less inspirational and more practical. We really can't predict next school year at this point, but we can help shape it. We can put some plans in place, we can put some thoughts in place, and we can begin the process of getting ready for next school year. So with that, we're actually going to switch to question and answer. And I know Dr. Ellis, let me stop my screen share here so you can actually see me. So I know Dr. Ellis has actually been moderating the chat, or not the chat, but the Google form, and kind of taking a look at what questions people are posting along with Mrs. Burial. So Dr. Ellis, what questions can we answer for families with a little bit of remaining time that we have?
So our first question is, you mentioned that some parents want their kids to participate virtually in in-class workshops. My fear is that this might be to the detriment of students who are actually physically present in class. Would it be possible to have separate, physically present and virtual versions of the workshops so that the experiences are better suited in each format?
That's a great question. We're definitely considering that. And one of the things we're trying to avoid is duplicating everything. So we're trying to figure out a good way to do that without doing two full, one online and one in person. But what we are looking at is doing where those participating virtually are participating in the instructional part and then moving offline to work independently. So they're not necessarily logged in for the entire hour of the workshop. We're also working on some other options, and we have actually done this in the past with students who were needing to stay home for medical reasons prior to this situation. So we do have some experience in making that successful, where the students in the class are getting that full workshop experience, and the ones who are at home are participating as much as possible and getting access to that content. It's really going to depend on what the workshop is and be addressed on a case-by-case basis. And we're also going to do a lot of let's try this and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, we're going to try a different way to fix it.
Thank you. Our next question, I rely a lot on library materials to create and support at-home learning. Is the library going to be available, or is this something that we will not have access to until stage 4?
It totally depends on closure. So when the campus is closed, the library won't be available. But when the campus is open, it definitely will. And I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with our head librarian on the Black Rock campus, and we were talking with the whole media services staff about how are we going to quarantine books when they come back, sanitize them, clean things, make sure that all of those materials are safe and get circulated. But we take very seriously that, of course, when you're homeschooling, you need all of those materials. Now, should the campus be closed, you still are going to need access to your curricular materials. So textbooks and other books, we're working on a system where at least at the beginning of the quarter, you can come in for a drive-through and get your course materials picked up much as you would a lunch, and pick up the things you need for the quarter and head home. And library materials could certainly be part of that. Your advisor would just have to help you navigate and look for what you want and pull that for you if the campus was not physically open.
All right, we have another question. Is it possible? I guess that one's not it, excuse me. How will you be balancing technology and non-technology time, since high amounts of screen time are not good for children?
Yeah, This is one of those places where it's awesome to be a homeschooling parent. So again, you as the parent educator are in the driver's seat for what your kids get. Our advisor time, of course, is going to be required. You do have to check in with your advisor by law. So that's a required digital time. But other than that, any other workshops would become, they are enrichment workshops. So you get to make a decision. If you decide that the screen time option is not a good option for you, then that workshop can be put on pause until we're back in physical situation where you can come to campus. And so you can choose to participate if we're open in person, and then choose not to participate if you're at home. You also get to balance. If you feel like your kid is getting more workshop screen time, then that might mean that you shift to novel studies for your language arts curriculum instead of doing an online language arts curriculum, or whatever the subject area that fits for you. So you have a lot of freedom as a parent educator to talk to your advisor about how to balance that out and to make sure that that's working for your family. The academic core subjects are really in your control with the advice of your advisor, and therefore you're not going to be required to be online for those portions.
KCRA reported the CSU system decided to switch to distance learning for the fall. Does the decision of higher learning institutions affect how the state looks at school closure in general?
I can answer that question. So, ultimately, every local educational agency, which the CSU system would be an example of this, they're the ones that are going to make determinations on what school looks like. And so, like Los Rios is as an entity is looking at going online. CSUs are going online statewide. The UCs right now are talking about options, kind of like we're doing, depending on what's happening. So every entity, whether that's a school district, a charter school, a institution of higher ed, they're going to be making their own individual decisions. What I do think, though, it does indicate is that we all recognize that the future is very dynamic and unknown, and that we need to sort of plan, and we need to plan with health and safety in mind first. And then all of the other important aspects of school will follow after those health and safety decisions are being made. I think it also kind of illustrates, though, that all of us as educational leaders right now, we're trying to make decisions with very limited guidance. And we're hoping that we're getting, more consistent guidance moving forward. So I guess this is my sort of like fourth step. If you happen to know someone who works in the state or works at California Department of Public Health, and if you want to like encourage them to produce some guidance that, we can use and have some common language that we're all working with, that would be really helpful. Because at this moment, that doesn't exist. And so we're all kind of looking at what other countries or states or communities that are a little ahead of us are doing to try to understand what might be the best path moving forward.
I can also just add a comment there. One of the big differences too that we're discussing is that there is a difference in higher education and in K-12 education, because K-12 education is actually mandated by law. So we have a different obligation to the public in what we're offering and how we're addressing these closures than the higher education schools do. Now, having said that, again, you're at PACT and this is independent study. And personally, for me, you have chosen to be not only at a charter school, which gives you a lot of choice and freedom, but an independent study. And so we want to provide you with as much choice as possible. We are going to make as much as we can available to you virtually so that you can choose for your child and your family how much of that home education is happening in your home and how much of it is happening driving over to our campus when that's available. Lots of choice.
Can I also add that we also have to think about the age of the children and what is developmentally appropriate for them. There's a wide variance in K-12, whereas the college system is looking at adult learning. So that's another thing that we're keeping in mind, is what is developmentally appropriate learning stages for the students.
So we have two more questions. The first of the last two. How are you thinking you will screen children daily to check for symptoms?
That is a really great question. We're looking at some models that are existing in some of our international countries at probably taking temperatures. That would be the most, if you will, like invasive thing that we would potentially do is take temperatures. But Dr. Ellis has actually been leading up our health and safety team. And one of the things that we've been talking about is this idea of really encouraging every family to do temperature checks at home before the student leaves the house. Because if a student comes to school and they have a fever, it's very inconvenient for the family because we're going to be calling and saying, hey, we need you to come pick up your kid. And because of coronavirus, more so than we've done in the past, we're probably going to call every single person on the emergency card list looking for someone to come pick up the child. So we'll really be putting out some messaging in the later summer and fall about what can you do at home to make sure your kid is ready to go to school. And then when they do come to school, here's what it's going to look like, in their classroom or their workshop or when they're coming on campus so that everyone is safe and healthy.
Tied to that, will students and staff be required to wear masks next year?
A second great question. I think, when we look at all of the other models that exist in the world, people are wearing masks, and that seems to be a very consistent practice. It's a way to ensure that if you are asymptomatic, you're not inadvertently spreading the virus without knowing that you're actually carrying it. And so while we haven't formalized an official requirement policy, I think at this point, we're looking at it being very strongly encouraged and being socially supported in the sense of we're talking about having middle and high school students actually producing some PSAs about why wearing masks are important. We're also looking at producing some reusable cloth-based Natomas Charter School masks that all students would receive one at the beginning of the school year and all staff members would receive one, and really encouraging everyone to do their part. Doing your part is making sure that you're not coming to school when you have a fever. It's making sure you're washing your hands. And it's probably also making sure that you're wearing a mask when you can't ensure physical distancing, that you're going to be interacting with other students or adults on campus.
I'm going to check the last two just to make sure there is nothing additionally posted.
Yeah.
So those were the end of the questions at this time. I do want to do a brief plug. The Student Services Department has a YouTube channel where our counselors post information regarding, for parents in particular, speaking to your child in an age-appropriate way about coronavirus, dealing with anxiety, depression, stress while quarantine. We also have an Instagram channel, Student Services at Natomas Charter School. I hope that's the right one. But it's in my signature line on my email, and it's also in Ms. Carter's weekly announcements. But if you subscribe to those, you can also get information to discuss this with your children. And we're developing one on the importance of masks from a student's perspective.
So with that, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting for today. I just want to say thank you to all of you for making time in your busy schedules that are even busier when we're all learning and working from home simultaneously. So I just want to say thank you for making time in your schedules to join us. This video will be posted on the Natomas Charter School YouTube page, and we just plan on leaving it there. So if you want to rewatch it at any time, you can. And similarly, we're doing parent meetings for the other 4 academies later today. And at the close of all of the parent meetings, we're actually going to be creating a frequently asked questions document with answers that we'll go ahead and send out to everyone via email, probably if not tomorrow, early next week. And certainly, throughout this journey, if you have any questions or ideas or thoughts, you can always reach out to me. You can reach out to Mrs. Carter, Dr. Ellis, or Laura Burial. We're all here to help you along with your educational advisor. Anything else, guys?
Thank you guys so much. We miss seeing your faces, and we hope that we get to do that soon.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you.